Hello and welcome back to Histories Tech, and today we are looking at the MBT-70. Now this tank was developed as a joint American-West German project to create the next generation of battle tank, not only for these two nations but for all of NATO. Had this plan worked out, NATO would use one singular tank design, modified for each individual country's use, as a way of combating the development of tanks within the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact. This tank was to incorporate all kinds of new technology and become the basis for a next-generation tank that would have served even to this day. But let's go ahead and look at this tank that almost was the main battle tank of NATO. Now, this tank development came about during the Cold War when really the main tank being used was the M48 Patton, which was being used by countries such as West Germany, the United States, Belgium, Norway, and a few others. However, at this time, many of these nations also used their own independent tanks, which meant that there was really no standardized equipment within NATO other than the M48, which was sadly starting to show its age as other tanks of the day being created by the Warsaw Pact were starting to show it up. But that all changed when this man, Robert McNamara, became Secretary of Defense. McNamara, who had actually been the president of the Ford Motor Company before he became Secretary of Defense, saw the usage of being cooperative with other international markets, such as Germany, in order to help basically vitalize markets and redo design and development. And he actually wanted to apply this ideology to NATO, and he was hoping to get NATO countries to work together to develop new pieces of technology and equipment that they could all work together with. It could be used from one nation to the next without any real issue, and it would actually bring down costs and make it easier to deploy this equipment. And because he actually favored German engineering, he decided a collaboration between the United States and Germany would benefit NATO the best. So McNamara approached the German defense minister, Franz Joseph Strauss, to basically come up with an idea to collaborate on a new main battle tank that they would work together and then basically deploy out to the rest of NATO. However, Strauss was actually not in favor of this because at the time Germany was developing their own independently designed tank, the Leopard 1. And instead they actually stated the United States should actually buy the Leopard 1 from them, and then from there they can go out and spread it to the rest of NATO. Now, even though the United States was not in favor of this, the Germans did agree to what was known as a common components program, so that the United States could use a lot of the common components of the Leopard 1 in the development of a new main battle tank that could be shared with NATO. And after getting the American Army brass to go along with the program, the General Motors Company was chosen to basically develop this new tank in a venture with the Germans. And thus the MBT-70 saw its birth. However, from the start, it was nothing but problematic. The first issue was over parts design. The Germans were using the metric system, the Americans were using the SAE system, and they just could not agree on measurements at the beginning. And then from there, the designs went on through different designs. They had issues over the main weaponry for it, and it just was one issue after another in developing this tank. Now, some of the design elements they actually were able to agree with was things such as a hydropneumatic suspension system, which basically would allow the MBT-70 to raise or lower itself as much as 28 inches, which meant that the tank could lower its bottom of its chassis as low as 4 inches above the ground or raise its chassis 28 inches above its standard resting height. It also featured a rather new weapon system, the M1 gun launcher system. It was a 152mm gun that not only could fire a 152mm round, also fired a 152mm missile, which meant that this tank could both indirectly and directly engage units in the field. It also housed a 3-man crew completely within the turret and used a new type of spaced armor that was designed basically to withstand radiation in addition to protecting the crew. However, the similarities stopped once again there, and basically Germany and the United States began independently developing their own versions of the MBT-70, with the biggest feature between the two tanks coming down to its propulsion system. The Americans deployed a Continental Motors 1,400 horsepower diesel engine that had a top speed of 48 miles per hour with a range of 401 miles versus the Germans' 4-stroke diesel engine, which was actually heavier and larger than the Americans' engine, which meant they actually had to redesign the chassis for it, and it ended up with a top speed of 45 miles per hour and only a range of 360 miles. Now, finally, by 1968, both the German and the American versions were complete, and they began field trials with them. They found that the MBT-7 was actually better mobility-wise than an M60. It had better acceleration, better mobility, and all in all, it was about 30% more efficient with speed than an M60. However, during the field trials, they found all the problems with it. The 152mm gun didn't work, so they replaced it with a 120mm gun made by the Germans that was much more efficient. The rocket launching system was problematic. It didn't work as well as it should have. It had a problem of cooking off itself inside of its casing, meaning that it would fire prematurely. The auto-loading system that they had developed for it didn't work the way it was supposed to. With all the changes that were made to the tank, they ended up making it 5 tons heavier than they needed it to, which meant that they had to increase its power and armor to help it. And it was also extremely overcomplicated to use. Because of these issues and the fact that it cost 5 times what it was supposed to cost, the project ended up being abandoned by the United States and Germany. However, as neither side wanted to waste the development of this tank, they both tried to use the frame for the basis of a new tank. The Germans basically used a shortened version of the MBT-70 to create the VT tank, and this was a dual-barreled turretless tank. However, the experiment never really went beyond the 2 prototypes. The United States also developed the XM803 based on the MBT-70, and this was basically designed to be a low-cost alternative to the MBT-70, basically about half the price. And even with all these changes to try to make a much more cost-effective tank, the United States ended up abandoning the project as well. And the Germans went ahead and continued with their Leopard 1 development, which would eventually lead to the Leopard 2, and is considered to be by many one of the finest German tanks ever built, and is actually one of the most exported tanks by Germany into other European and non-European nations. As for the United States, of course, they went into using the M60 as their main tank. However, this was only a short-term solution, as there was actually a lot of features on the MBT-70 that the United States wanted for a future tank. There was a lot of technology in the MBT-7 that the United States did want. They did like the German-made 120mm cannon. They did like a lot of the armor ideas. And another one was actually the propulsion that never got used in the MBT-7, the AGT-1500 gas turbine engine. And with the $20 million saved not continuing the MBT-70 program, the United States started the XM1 program, which utilized a lot of this equipment. The 120mm cannon, the AGT-1500 gas turbine engine, the idea for a new armor design. And of course, all of these features from the MBT-70 would be added into the XM1, which would become the M1 Abrams. Interestingly enough, the Abrams in M1 Abrams comes after General Crichton Abrams, the one who wanted to stop the MBT-70 program. But there you have it, a look at the MBT-7, a NATO-developed tank that never happened, but because of its failure, we ended up getting the Leopard 2, we ended up getting the M1 Abrams, and so basically this tank had to fail for these 2 tanks to come into fruition in existence. Unfortunately, like so many projects like this, it ended up costing millions in failure before we actually got something that was worth it. But that's it for today. I thank you for joining me, and I look forward to talking to you on the next time.